All right, now we got Thad. Thad, I believe, is new to the show, and used to be in the 1700s, like me, as an old dude, and is finding it difficult psychologically to analyze his games. Absolutely true. I want to say that's everyone's problem. And my own just general teaching philosophy, as well as self-improvement, has always been to stress that going over your games is really the only way. Not, I shouldn't say the only way. It is the best way to improve your game. It's also the most difficult because it's so hard to look at your own moves. But once you get into it, once you get a flow of looking at your own moves, it can really help. And I created this show years ago, and the basic premise was to help people go over their own games. And as I stated at the beginning of the show, we're at an interesting inflection point just in the chess world, where now that we don't have traditional over-the-board games to go over, we're going to evolve into something else. If you are thinking about submitting a game for next month, which will be usually the last Wednesday of the month, then I would strongly suggest trying to find someone you can play a long game with online. It's not easy. It's a new thing. People aren't used to it. It's difficult for me to play longer games online just because I get distracted with, looking at the latest COVID numbers or whatever the freak it is, right? But that's simply the newest challenge that all chess players are facing. On this new site I'm working with, the ChessDojo Discord channel, there's a lot of people there that are looking for games, and we are trying to set up some way of training, and we're interested also in hearing from people how to do it. And I think the whole chess world in general, right? There's always been blitz chess, and that's been going on forever. But now, how do we play online chess and feel good about it, like longer games? All right, so here's Thad's game, and this is a known variation, nothing wrong so far. And here's, I thought, the first interesting moment that actually has everything to do with, was it Kevin Lee's game? Yeah, right. Kevin Lee's game. As you go back with that was also a Slough, actually, but a totally different Slough, where you played Bishop G6, and the problem there is twofold. One, you're at risk of the bishop being shut out on the side of the board, and two, I feel like you're losing a tempo because Bishop E6 keeps that tempo, right? I don't think White wants to play D5 because the pawn just gets to be kind of funny, and you can go to either one of those squares. And maybe, I suspect it was a psychological thing where you didn't think Bishop E6 was possible. In any case, I think you've played fine up until this point. And only after Bishop G6 do I think you're a little bit worse. Bishop G5, however, that's not a good move. He needs to be thinking about some kind of just developing move, maybe even H3 and Bishop E3, those kinds of moves to constrict your pieces. And on Bishop G5, you could just ask him the question about H6. Where does he want to go? That's what you did. He took. Now you own the dark squares. Now you really own the dark squares. So your only problem now is the bishop on G6. Really important to stress that this guy is now unopposed and he's pretty angry, right? So at some point, we're going to be looking at this kind of business. That looked weird to me. It's probably not wrong. Getting the tempo was definitely right. And now bishop H5. Okay, so the weird thing is, you've invested all this time, right, in putting the knight on C5. And the knight's at least talking to this pawn. So the bishop has one, one virtue as it is. Is it an easy position to play? No. I think part of the problem is your rook kind of wants to go back. You know, it doesn't really want to be on the c file. And of course, you want to find some way for him to like force him to take on to relieve this tension. And your bishop wants to be on this diagonal. So yeah, that's part of the drama here. We want to arrange some kind of thing where we're going to say that the beauty of your position now is the dark square bishop. Okay, b4. Here you're giving it up willingly and then going back. And now we got to say, it's hard to say what's going on. Okay, good move. And I like it a lot that you are going to now play e4 and get some juice on the king. That was definitely a mistake, right? Because the rook was on the same file as the queen, right? And just a general rule of thumb is that's what we'd like to be doing. Good move. And now the initiative passes to you. Fantastic. Great move. And watch this shot, everybody. Bam! Rook takes f2. Bam! Check to the miserable king. Check. Check. Mate. Very nice, that. Very nice. Yeah, Thad, I'm hoping. Hopefully you come back on the show. Hopefully you find a way to play some games online. That was a great game, with very few complaints on my part. Oh, Paula in New Jersey, don't be so downtrodden. Come on. Here we're going to get a French, and Nicholas is black. Let me flip this around. And now for the purposes of this discussion, let me show a variation that I've played many times. And I've gotten in this thing, you know, let me just say this. When you go on chess.com, nowadays, like, there's all these little opening names that I hadn't even heard of. Like, for example, they're calling this the Paulson attack. And I don't find those too helpful. But I do find it's helpful to give structures names. And one structure that I got quite a bit here in the past was like knight h6, bishop d3, knight f5. And I called this I'm going to start calling this anyway, the Vogonian structure, because Vogonian played this in a number of his games. Really interesting and dynamic stuff, and we're going to get that today in a slightly different move order. So bishop e2, snip, snip, knight h6, bishop d3, kind of weird, and Nicholas goes for it. So the question is, how big of a deal is it that white lost the tempo? And one of the weird things about it is I'm not too sure is that bad of a deal for white. You know, anytime you lose a tempo, it seems horrendous to lose the tempo. But the tempo that black got was to put his queen on b6, and it's just a common idea for white to play for knight a4 into c5, which he could have done, I think, a little bit more violently in the game. So yeah, I wasn't sure. I think it's a really interesting position that's, you know, related, as it were, to the Vogonian position I showed just a touch earlier here. Right? Okay. So h6. Now this is a little weird, and I think you should play bishop e7 first. But in general, what's going to happen in this game, which is really nice, and it's important to understand this structure, is that this is a bishop that looks really terrible. But as they say, there's no such thing as bad bishops, there's only bad players. And h6 is great because you do want to control this square, and you do want eventually to dream about g5 and f4 to free this thing. Right. And that actually brings me to an important strategic point about the other one that'll help us understand some of White's grief in this game, is that in this position, the plan that I think is most effective for White is to play, let's say, knight c3, bishop e6, and now either castles first or simply h4. And the intention is to play knight e2, to dream about bishop g5, to dream about knight f4, and if he ever checks you, just sidestep him with king f1. That's a very rich positional variation that's been played a lot. And my experience with black, as having played it with black a lot, is that most players don't get it as white. And then, we're going to get actually what Nicholas gets in this game. So queen... Wait a second. No, this is different. Hold on. Sorry about that. Bishop e2. That was a different game that Nicholas sided. Okay, h6. Knight a4. Maybe the queen should go all the way back to d8. This was and this is precisely the problem with playing with the queen b6 move. Bishop e3 feels more natural to me, but okay. Rook c1, good. Queen e2, and here's where I feel like White starts to lose the thread. He needs to understand that this is actually really annoying, and he doesn't have forever, because Black will eventually start his own drama himself. And White needs to play, I think, b4. Very simple and strong move, both making this kind of annoying threat and supporting a knight c5. That's why I think h6 probably an inaccuracy, because he didn't need it. And the reason why this losing the tempo for White isn't so bad. But like I said, White starts to lose the thread here. Like, I don't know what that move does, right? Now the knight's cut out. Of important French cheapo is threatened here with knight takes e5. Good move. Good move. Great move. Really fantastic move. And now Black is on top, because we are going to own the light squares and the dark squares after we play f4. And that's why one of the only real critiques I have for you here, Nicholas, is that you should definitely play f4. That's a gimme here, right? That's just a gimme. So White understands it, but you do it anyway. And now it's a little bit unclear, but you're correctly right that if you just move the bishop back somewhere, you're going to be great. That bishop is, it's a really great position for French players to think about, right? Because you are now, that bishop is no longer, some sad guy. He's a monster. And g4, this is actually really interesting. Like, maybe not so bad, but it really feels wrong, right? Because now your bishop loses a lot of squares when you play g4, especially this one. But White doesn't sense the danger. f5 was indeed really interesting. And now you get the full blockade, and I assume you're doing great here. Beautiful. Look at this. Now, something amazing happened here. I just assumed that Black was going to win this game. But Nicholas somehow doesn't win the game. He said when he got here, he assumed he'd be winning. And let me just say, of course you're winning this position. You don't need to turn on the computer to do it, I don't think. Let me repeat my oft-cited dogma that when you've got bishops of opposite color, the side with the initiative is going to win. And that's definitely true here. You've got the initiative and he doesn't have anything. So, all right, how did it go downhill? And then, all right, the sloppy move. Rook h2. All about the initiative, really, right? So bishop d3, cut the rook, and he's done for. And psychologically, I guess we have to say it was all about you wanting, well, it was about protecting the pawn and wanting to do this. And then unfortunately, he's somehow alive here. Is it true? It doesn't seem right that he's allowed to survive this thing here. Yeah, your pieces are getting kind of messed. Your rook is getting messed with. Oh, that was unfair. I still, yeah. Oh. Disgusted with myself and my inability to put the game away, I demanded a draw and left the hall in a fury. Yeah. Well, that's true. Vogonian was a genius. It's true.